And now, ladies and gentlemen, a touch of the past, present, and future.
Let's start with the title. The pursuit of the great indoors plays on the pursuit of the great outdoors, which intends to evoke notions of getting away or going into the wild, which is only necessary when the wild has been marginalized by civilization. We have in fact only started to pursue the great outdoors since the indoors has become so commonplace that nature now appears as the exception, even though nature was here first, is what the planet actually produces, and is in the DNA of everything we humans manufacture. Now let's move to the plot. The journey of our hero is supposed to highlight the experience of the relationship of people with the environment under capitalism. The first major tenet of this relationship is that we perceive ourselves as somehow something separate and distinct from the natural world. We survive despite our environment, not because of it. The second tenet of this relationship is our presumptive mastery of nature, here manifest by the construct of the indoors. The piece tries to portray the blurriness of this construct by raising questions like, is the figure outdoors when it is in the house with open windows? This demonstrates the superficial nature of the construct of the indoors and presents the apparent truth that there is no natural existence of an indoors. It is merely the consequence of a self-appreciating species that trapped the outdoors in materials made out of the outdoors in such a way that our particular species is fooled into thinking that we have created an entirely new space, which we have named indoors in victory. Okay, now let's discuss the ending. After encountering several iterations along the continuum of indoors, our hero is finally satisfied when he reaches the house with no windows. However, despite his attempt to isolate himself by creating an illusory space separated from the outdoors, the outside world will disrupt that fantasy if creating that space affects the environment. For example, if humans use fossil fuels to build big houses, it will eventually lead to climate change, including more natural disasters, and will quickly end the facade of a safe and separate indoors. This piece has its grounds in urban Marxist social theorists, particularly David Harvey, Marshall Berman, and Guy Debord. In Harvey's discussion of rent, he highlights how class power can alter ownership and perception of space. He explains that landlords gain power and legitimacy by monopolizing space. For example, the powerful landlords create special islands of scarcity by taking their land off the market. This concept of monopolizing space by manipulating the true value of the land or space demonstrates an implicit mastery of the space. In other words, the space can be commoditized like any other good. This is a central tenet of the relationship with the environment under capitalism. The environment has been conquered, its value can be manipulated, it can be owned, packaged, and sold. Berman comments on modernization's effect on community, writing, "Once the interstate highway system was in place, the most ordinary everyday activities, such as walking to the corner for a quart of milk, were suddenly impossible. Once the figure in the piece enters the house with no windows, the figure is for the first time completely obscured from the viewer. This intends to depict that by viewing ourselves first as distinctly separate from nature, we subsequently view ourselves as distinctly separate from one another, and so the privacy associated with the indoors is inextricably linked to a changing sense of individualism and its relationship to community and openness." The music in the piece is a rather lame homage to Debord's détournement, or a hijacking of accepted behavior and meaning by inverting or perverting it, like graffiti or squatting. The music is from vaudeville theater of the first half of the 20th century and mimics the nonchalant perception of real problems. For example, some of the audio is taken from a blackface performance in which jokes are made at the expense of African Americans. Blackface is now viewed by mainstream society as inappropriate, but was once laughed at because society did not take black civil rights seriously. Similarly, the lack of serious concern and mockery of environmental issues may eventually be viewed as inappropriate and naive. The applause picks up as the house crumbles, illustrating a scenario in which we continue to applaud innovations to improve the indoors, and so are eventually stuck giving a standing ovation to our own destruction.